Hello and welcome to JNC Tutorials. In this video I will be demonstrating a variety of different ways of miking up a drum kit in a studio setting. I'll be focusing primarily on the kick drum, the snare drum and overhead miking techniques. I will also be playing these different positions for you side by side so you can hear where they sound. On that note, a small disclaimer, I will advise you to watch the video in HD and to listen through a decent pair of speakers or a good set of headphones just so you can really hear the difference between the positions, as some can be quite subtle. For the kick drum I am using an AKG D112 mic. For both the top and the bottom of the snare I am using a Shure SM57. And for the overheads I am using AKG C451Bs and also Rode NT2A microphones. When it comes to miking a drum kit, there is a myriad of possibilities when you consider all the different positions you can use in one simple setup. I will be focusing mainly on the ones that are most commonly used in a studio situation. For the kick drum there is four that I am going to demonstrate. There is in the kick drum on the beater, in the kick drum off of the beater, outside of the shell, on axis, and outside of the shell, off axis. When it comes to miking the snare drum, I'm focusing on three main positions. I'm miking the centre of the snare, I'm miking the rim of the snare perpendicularly, and I'm also miking horizontally across the snare. As well as that, I am miking the bottom of the snare directly onto the beat. This makes a much more crisper sound that can be mixed in with the others, but you'll hear them back to back separately and mixed together now. When it comes to overhead miking, I'm focusing on four techniques. I'll be using an XY technique, ORTF, I'll be using spaced pair, and also the Glyn Johns method. For the XY technique, you have to take the two pencil microphones and have the capsules 90 degrees to each other as close as possible without them actually touching. In an ideal situation, they would be taken up the same place as each other. But as that's not physically possible, you need to get them as close as possible without touching at a perfect 90 degrees. For the ORTF method, it's like the XY, but they are out like this. And the measurements are, you need to have an angle of 110 degrees in the middle, with the capsules of the microphones being 17 centimeters apart. Ideally measure this with a ruler or a tape measure. The XY and the ORTF are used over the kit, like so. But a little tip you can have with the ORTF specifically, if you've got a relatively new drummer, or someone that likes to bash the cymbals a lot, it's possible to mic behind the drummer down at the kit. This gives you less of a cymbal sound and you get more tom resonance. But obviously the downside to this is if you're doing a live take of the whole band, it will pick up a lot more bleed. The next overhead method I'm going to show you is known as the Glyn Johns technique. This is a minimalist way of micing the whole kit with as few microphones as possible but still getting a full sound. You can actually get away with just micing the kick drum and having two overhead mics that you can see here. The difference between the Glyn Johns and the space pair microphones is the fact that rather than being centered with the kick drum and the center of the kit, they are both pointing directly at the center of the snare. Same as before, you can measure with a tape measure ideally, but you can use a cable just like this. Mark off the center of the snare, to the center of the microphone, down to the center of the other microphone. And once they're both exactly the same distance from the center of the snare, that's the Glyn Johns technique. Those are the most common ways of micing up a drum kit in a studio situation. This has been J&C Tutorials. Thank you for tuning in.